The crew of the Argonaut, a ragtag salvage ship, had been drifting through the outer rim of the galaxy for weeks. Their mission was simple: locate abandoned stations, sift through wreckage, and claim anything of value. But the cold, empty stretches of space were becoming an increasingly perilous place, where the real treasure wasn't gold or technology, it was survival. And they had almost given up on finding anything worthwhile when they came across the moon. It was a silent world, a small forgotten chunk of rock, cloaked in the shadows of an uncharted gas giant. The Argonaut dropped out of its warp jump, the ship's engines rumbling as it decelerated to a crawl. The captain, Tessa Hawk, stood on the observation deck, peering out at the barren landscape. The scanners had pinged on something unusual, a faint energy signal, almost buried beneath layers of debris. "Anything?" she asked, her voice edged with a rare note of interest. Her crew, a collection of eccentric and disillusioned ex-soldiers, engineers and wanderers, had long since stopped caring about rumors of hidden riches in this part of the galaxy. Jackson, the ship's chief engineer, ran his fingers over the console, the holographic interface flickering in the dim light. "There's a source of power down there. Weak, but it's active. It's old. Could be the remains of a long-forgotten research station, or," he trailed off, his eyes narrowing, "or something more." Tessa nodded, her instincts sharpening. She didn't believe in coincidences, especially in a place as desolate as this. "Prepare for a landing. We're checking it out." The crew boarded their transport shuttles, preparing for what was supposed to be a routine recovery operation. But as the shuttle descended through the thick atmosphere, an eerie feeling settled over the group. The surface below was a graveyard of broken structures, rusted remnants of an old colony, now abandoned and consumed by time. But among the ruins, a large triangular shape stood undisturbed, partially buried beneath the shifting sands. Its sleek metal surface gleamed in the dull sunlight, almost as though it had been waiting. Tessa felt a pull, an unsettling urge, deep within her chest. It was as if the ground itself was calling her. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. They made their way toward the structure, their boots crunching over the cracked earth. When they reached the triangular monument, a faint hum filled the air, vibrating through the soles of their boots. Jackson scanned the surface, his eyes widening in disbelief. "This isn't just any old tech," he muttered. "This is something ancient." The team set to work, cutting away the debris to reveal the object more fully. The moment they exposed its core, the hum intensified, and the ground beneath them trembled. A strange metallic door slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark, narrow passage. Without hesitation, Tessa stepped forward, her hand resting on the cold surface of the door. It opened as though it had been waiting for her touch. Inside, the walls were lined with flickering holograms, alien symbols glowing softly in the dim light. And then, at the center of the room, a pedestal rose, holding a single, shimmering orb, its surface alive with swirling energy. Without thinking, Tessa reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers made contact, a rush of images flooded her mind. Earth's past, its glorious civilizations, and the sudden collapse. A flash of images that took her breath away. But there was more. The orb spoke, its voice not heard through her ears, but inside her mind. The bloodline awakens. Tessa staggered back, her heart racing. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, the room shaking violently. Her crew members rushed to her side, but she couldn't focus on them. All she could hear, all she could feel, was the weight of the words, echoes from a past long buried. And then, the transmission began to play across the galaxy, spreading out like a web, reaching into the farthest corners of human-occupied space. The message was clear, even if its meaning was not. Earth's bloodline has returned. The transmission spread like wildfire, across the galaxy, from the neon-lit megacities of the inner core to the lawless frontier worlds of the outer rim. Humanity's scattered descendants heard the same cryptic message. The bloodline awakens. Many dismissed it as a hoax, an old-world myth resurfacing to stir ancient superstitions. But for a select few, the message wasn't just noise. It was a summons. On Erebus Prime, a war-torn industrial world, General Darius Voss stood on a ruined balcony, watching smoke rise from the latest skirmish below. His mercenary forces had fought for years against the ruling corporate warlords, but now something inside him stirred. The moment the transmission hit, he felt it, like a forgotten memory surfacing in his blood. As the words echoed in his mind, his second-in-command approached. "General, we've intercepted a data fragment from deep space. It's tied to the signal." Voss examined the data. It contained coordinates, ones that weren't supposed to exist. He clenched his jaw. This wasn't just some random message. It was calling him. On Valkyr Station, a pirate stronghold drifting in the void, a woman hunched over a blinking console. Dr. Sienna Kale, an exiled geneticist, had spent her life chasing forbidden knowledge. She had once worked for the Dominion's highest research division, until she uncovered something she wasn't meant to. Now she was running. When the transmission hit, her neural implants flared with activity. The encrypted data it carried was unlike anything she had seen before. "This," she whispered, scanning the code. "This is ancient." She decrypted a fragment. DNA markers detected. Lineage confirmed. Her hands trembled. Could it be? On the forest-covered world of Gaia IV, a young orphan named Ren sat beneath an enormous tree, staring at the night sky. He had always felt different from the others in the colony, always heard whispers in his dreams, seen flashes of places he had never been. When the transmission came, the whispers became voices. The visions sharpened. He saw a ruined planet, a golden city buried beneath the sands, and he saw people, warriors, leaders, wanderers, coming together. He gasped, clutching his chest. His blood was burning. The village elder, an old man with knowing eyes, approached him. "It has begun, hasn't it?" Ren looked up, confused. "What has?" The elder exhaled, watching the stars. "The past is calling, and you, child, must answer." Across the galaxy, these scattered souls, and countless others, felt the same pull. They didn't know why. They didn't know each other. But they all knew one thing. Something ancient had awoken, and soon they would be drawn together. But they weren't the only ones listening. Deep in the void, aboard a colossal vessel cloaked in darkness, a figure watched the transmission play out. Their skin was like polished obsidian, their eyes filled with the cold calculation of a being that had lived far beyond its natural years. "The bloodline stirs," the figure murmured. "We cannot allow them to rise." With a wave of their hand, a dozen assassins departed into the shadows. The hunt had begun. The journey to the coordinates wasn't easy. Those who felt the pull, Darius Voss, Dr. Sienna Kale, young Ren, and others, were all being hunted. The moment they started moving toward the unknown, something unseen moved against them. Voss's mercenary forces were ambushed by corporate assassins on Erebus Prime. The attack came without warning. Precision strikes that targeted his command center, forcing him to flee with only a handful of trusted soldiers. Dr. Kale's research lab on Valkyr Station was raided by an unknown faction. By the time she escaped through the maintenance ducts, her work had been wiped, her servers fried, and her closest allies executed. Someone wanted her silenced. Ren barely made it off Gaia IV. The village elder who had warned him was dead before sunrise, his home burned to the ground. Ren ran, stowing away on a passing cargo freighter, guided only by instincts he couldn't explain. Someone didn't want them to reach their destination. But against all odds they did. The coordinates led them to a forbidden sector of space, one that didn't officially exist. As their ships arrived, they found something impossible. A planet, hidden in the cosmic void, shrouded in energy signatures that had masked its presence for centuries. It was Earth, or what was left of it. They landed in the ruins of an ancient city, its skyline long since reduced to skeletal towers and dust. Time had not been kind. The air was thin but breathable, the land scarred by craters and decay. Yet beneath the destruction, something lingered, an undeniable presence. Darius Voss led the way, his warrior instincts flaring. He didn't know why, but he felt like he had been here before. Cyane's scanners detected strange energy pulses beneath the surface. "Something's still active down there," she muttered, adjusting her readings. "Old world tech, maybe even pre-collapse." Ren shivered. The whispers were louder now. "You were always meant to return." They pressed deeper into the ruins, following the pulses of energy toward what looked like an ancient vault, its entrance sealed by layers of reinforced metal. Then came the first real shock. The vault didn't open to technology. It opened to them. As they approached, biometric scanners activated, scanning their faces, their blood, their very DNA. One by one, the locks disengage. Cyane's breath caught in her throat. "It's us," she whispered. "It's been waiting for us." With a deep rumble, the vault doors slid open, revealing a massive chamber lined with preserved artifacts, holographic records, genetic databanks, weapons of impossible design. At the chamber center, a throne-like chair pulsed with energy, its surface inscribed with forgotten Earth symbols. A single message, preserved through centuries, flickered to life. "If you have found this, then the time has come. The blood of Earth must rise again." But before they could react, alarms blared through the ruins. They weren't alone. Something was coming for them. The alarms wailed through the ancient chamber, pulsing in time with the flickering holographic message. Dust fell from the vaulted ceiling as deep tremors shook the ruins. Something, or someone, had followed them to Earth. Darius Voss snapped into action. Defensive positions. Now, his mercenary instincts kicked in as he pulled his rifle and scanned the shadows beyond the vault's entrance. Dr. Sienna Kale frantically tapped at the control panels, trying to make sense of the data flooding the ancient systems. "This place isn't just some forgotten relic," she said, her voice edged with disbelief. "It's been active this whole time. It's a vault, a database, and—" She hesitated, watching as the throne-like chair pulsed with power. And a trigger. Ren, standing transfixed before the throne, barely heard her. The whispers in his mind were deafening now, no longer just murmurs, but voices, memories. From a past he had never lived. 1,000 generations of human history flowed through him in an instant. He gasped, his knees nearly buckling. Then the first shots rang out. A dozen figures poured through the broken entrance, their forms shrouded in sleek obsidian armor. They moved with unnatural speed, their weapons eerily silent as they fired bolts of dark energy into the chamber. The ancients had arrived. Darius returned fire, his enhanced reflexes making him faster than he should have been. He dove behind cover, his mind processing the combat situation at impossible speeds. He knew what they were about to do before they did it. His body reacted accordingly, dodging, aiming, firing, like something deep within him had been unlocked. Sienna, crouched behind an overturned console, activated a pulse emitter, sending a blast of electromagnetic interference through the room. The ancients staggered for a split second, just enough time for her to recognize their technology. It wasn't just advanced, it was human. Altered, evolved, but unmistakably derived from Earth's lost civilization. "They're us," she whispered, horrified. Ren, still standing before the throne, barely registered the battle. The voices in his head reached a crescendo. His blood burned, his veins alight with something powerful and ancient. And then instinct took over. As an ancient assassin lunged toward him, blade gleaming, Ren raised his hand. Without thought, without training, a shockwave erupted from his body. The assassin was hurled back with immense force, crashing into the far wall. The entire chamber trembled, the very air crackling with energy. Silence fell for a split second. Then the ancients hesitated. Sienna's eyes widened. He's activating the bloodline. Darius took the opportunity, rallying their forces. Push them back. Don't let them regroup. The tide shifted. The ancients faltered as something beyond their understanding rippled through the room, an awakening of something they had long feared. Ren turned, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He understood now. The lost legacy of Earth wasn't just knowledge. It was power, and it had finally awakened. The remaining ancients retreated, their dark forms vanishing into the ruins as quickly as they had arrived. The vault trembled in their wake, the air still crackling with residual energy from Ren's sudden awakening. Darius Voss lowered his rifle, scanning the shadows. They weren't expecting that, he muttered. No, Dr. Sienna Kale agreed, her fingers flying over the ancient control panels. And that means one thing. They don't know how the bloodline works. She turned to Ren, who was still breathing heavily, his hands trembling. His eyes, still faintly glowing, darted around as if seeing the world for the first time. What was that? He whispered, his voice laced with awe and fear. Sienna hesitated before answering. You activated something. Your DNA, your entire genetic structure. It's responding to this place. She turned to the massive holographic display above them, where Earth's long-forgotten history unfolded in fragments. And if this archive is correct, you're not the only one. Darius stepped forward, his arms crossed. Explain. Now. Sienna pointed to the swirling holograms, shifting through lines of ancient code and forgotten data. Earth's collapse wasn't just a war, a natural disaster, or some cosmic accident. It was engineered. She highlighted a fragment of an old transmission, its text barely decipherable. Last remnants hidden. Genetic failsafe engaged. They will return when the time is right. She turned back to them, her expression grim. They knew. The last humans on Earth knew they were going to fall. And so they encoded something into their descendants, something buried in the bloodline itself. Darius frowned. And that something is, yes, she finished. Or rather, people like Ren. Those who carry the original human genome, untainted by centuries of augmentation, cloning, or alien hybridization. She exhaled. The pure-blooded remnants of Earth's last stand. Ren shook his head, trying to process. But I'm nobody. I grew up on a colony world. I don't even know my real parents. Sienna's gaze softened. You were nobody. Until you came here. She gestured at the vault. And now, you're part of something ancient. Something powerful. And they know it. Darius clenched his fists. Which is why they're trying to kill us. Sienna nodded. The ancients, whoever they are, must have been hunting down Earth's bloodline for generations, making sure no one ever came back here, making sure no one ever woke up. A deep metallic groan echoed through the vault, sending chills down their spines. The energy pulsing through the chamber grew brighter, the holograms shifting. The archive wasn't just showing them the past anymore. It was reactivating. Ren's pulse quickened. He could feel something more, something deeper. And then, for the first time, the voices in his mind spoke clearly. You are the last hope of humanity. Rise, or fall like those before you. The vault's systems surged to life, and deep in the cosmos, something else stirred. They had awakened more than just history. They had awakened the war. The vault's lights surged, casting the chamber in a golden glow. The hologram swirled faster, streams of long-forgotten data flashing across the room. The air grew thick with energy, almost humming with intent. Ren's breathing was ragged. He could feel something inside him shifting, unraveling, like a door opening in his mind that had been locked for centuries. Darius Voss turned to Dr. Sienna Kale. What the hell is happening? She frantically scanned the control panels. The vault is responding to Ren's activation. It's waking up, broadcasting something. Darius stiffened. To who? Before she could answer, the sky outside darkened. A massive, looming shadow eclipsed the ruined city above them. An enemy fleet had arrived. High above Earth's shattered surface, the Ancients' flagship, Erebus Eternal, hung in orbit like a silent predator. It was sleek and angular, its hull blacker than the void itself, absorbing every stray signal and light wave. Inside the bridge, the supreme executor of the Ancients stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable as he observed the holographic display of the vault's activation. A subordinate knelt before him. "Executor, the vault has awakened. The bloodline is confirmed." The executor exhaled slowly, his voice colder than space itself. "Then our worst fears are realized." He turned toward the fleet commanders, his crimson eyes gleaming. "Deploy the purge squads. The bloodline must be erased before it can awaken further." With a single gesture, the invasion began. Back inside the vault, the ancient systems projected a final warning. "Enemy forces DTHT. Protocol Alpha INITA HEDI." The ground beneath them trembled. Walls slid apart, revealing a hidden armory untouched by time. Weapons of elegant forgotten craftsmanship emerged from the shadows. Rifles with glowing blue cores, sleek armor designed for warriors of a different age. Darius grabbed the nearest weapon, its grip molding perfectly to his hands. This fight just got real. Ren's mind pulsed with 1,000 memories that weren't his. He turned to the others, his voice steadier than before. "We can't run. We were meant to stand here, to fight here." Sienna glanced at the sky, where enemy dropships were descending like locusts. "Then we'd better hurry up and remember how." Darius smirked, cocking his rifle. "I think it's in our blood." The first wave of ancient assassins crashed through the vault entrance, their obsidian armor gleaming. But this time, the Earthborn warriors weren't just running. They were ready. Ren clenched his fists, and the air rippled around him as forgotten power surged through his veins. Earth's lost defenders had returned, and for the first time in centuries. The war for humanity's future had begun. The first clash was thunderous. The ancients surged into the vault, their obsidian armor absorbing the dim golden light, their blades humming with lethal energy. But this time, the Earthborn warriors didn't fall back. They stood their ground. Darius Voss moved like a man possessed, his instincts sharpened beyond anything he had ever known. He ducked beneath the sweeping arc of an ancient's blade, pivoted, and fired a plasma round straight through his attacker's chest. Before the body hit the ground, he was already moving to the next. His mind processed movements faster than humanly possible, his hands reacting as if guided by something older than training, something genetic. Dr. Sienna Kale wasn't a soldier, but she wasn't helpless either. She had scavenged a sleek, curved rifle from the vault's armory, its energy cells still pulsing with untapped power. She took a deep breath, aimed, and fired. The shot crackled through the air, striking an ancient dead center. The enemy's armor sizzled, its body convulsing before collapsing in a heap. Ren stood at the center of the chaos, unmoving. His vision blurred as the voices in his mind converged into a single command. "Unleash it." When the next assassin lunged at him, Ren raised his hand, palm outward. A force, raw, unseen, rippled through the air. The ancient was yanked backward, as if gravity itself had betrayed him, his body slamming into the wall with bone-crushing force. The others stopped mid-charge, hesitating. Ren's breath came slow and deep. He could feel it now, the untapped power of Earth's forgotten warriors, locked inside him, waiting. The vault systems pulsed in response to his awakening. The holograms overhead shifted, displaying figures clad in golden armor, wielding weapons of impossible design. Their eyes glowed with the same energy now coursing through Ren's veins. "The last guardians of Terra," Sienna whispered, her mind racing. They weren't just soldiers. They were something more. Ren clenched his fists. The air around him vibrated as unseen energy crackled in his wake. And now we are. Above the battlefield, the Erebus Eternal loomed, its weapon systems locking onto the vault's location. The Supreme Executor observed the chaos below, his expression unreadable. "The bloodline is active," one of his commanders reported. "The purge squads are failing." The Executor narrowed his eyes. "Then we escalate." He raised a single hand, and the warship's main cannon began to glow. Back in the vault, the battle rage. Darius fought like a man unchained, tearing through the enemy ranks. Sienna recalibrated the vault's defenses, activating automated turrets that had slept for centuries. Ren, at the center of it all, felt something shifting inside him, something still waking up. And then he heard it, a deep, ancient voice rumbling through his very being. "Awaken fully, or perish." The Earthborn warriors were winning this fight, but the true battle was just beginning. The Erebus Eternal's main cannon reached full charge, its core glowing like a miniature sun. The Supreme Executor watched the battlefield below with cold calculation. "If the bloodline cannot be erased by warriors," he murmured, "then we will bury them beneath the ashes of their own world." He lowered his hand. Fire. A beam of annihilation lanced downward, a pillar of pure energy meant to erase the last remnants of Earth's legacy in a single, merciless strike. Inside the vault, alarms blared. Sienna's eyes darted to the holographic displays. "They're targeting us. We have seconds." Before she could finish, Ren moved. He didn't think, he knew. His body blurred as ancient instincts took over. He threw both hands outward, and the force within him erupted. The very air cracked with pressure as an unseen energy field expanded around them. The warship's beam struck and stopped. The vault trembled, but did not fall. The energy of the ship's weapon, powerful enough to vaporize mountains, was held in place by an invisible force, by Ren. The air vibrated. The pressure increased. The planet itself seemed to respond. Darius, crouched behind cover, watched in awe. "That's impossible." Sienna's breath caught. "No," she whispered. "That's what he was meant to do." Ren's body pulsed with power. His mind expanded beyond the vault, beyond the battle, reaching into something deeper, something buried. And then the vault answered. The ground rumbled as colossal structures, hidden beneath centuries of ruin, began to rise. Massive towers of ancient design, pulsing with blue energy, emerged from beneath the earth. Forgotten technology, dormant for eons, came to life. The ship's beam wavered, then reversed. Ren, now fully awakened, redirected the energy back toward the Erebus Eternal. The Executor's eyes widened as his own weapon turned against him. "No," he breathed. The energy beam struck the warship dead center. Explosions rippled along its hull as its shields shattered like glass. The Erebus Eternal, pride of the ancients, broke apart in a silent, cataclysmic fireball. The remaining enemy ships, seeing their leader fall, hesitated. Then, Earth's ancient defenses activated. Golden energy surged across the sky as newly awakened planetary defenses targeted the remaining ancient fleet. Plasma turrets, hidden for millennia, erupted from the ruins, unleashing a storm of firepower. The invaders never stood a chance. The ancients fled, their forces shattered. As silence fell over the battlefield, Darius let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Well," he muttered, "that escalated quickly." Sienna turned to Ren, who stood at the heart of it all, his eyes still glowing with untapped power. "What now?" Ren looked to the rising towers, to the reborn defenses of Earth. "The war isn't over," he said, "but for the first time in centuries, humanity has a fighting chance." He turned to face the stars. "And we're taking our future back." The blood of Earth had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same.